Rome crowned many emperors, but none as shocking as the boy who wore the purple at just 13. Imagine commanding legions, making life and death decisions, and surviving the deadly intrigues of the imperial palace, all before even finishing childhood. This is the story of the boy emperor who ruled an empire no one expected a child to control. If you want to uncover the full shocking story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more history revealed. Rome was a city of power, ambition, and danger, where the throne was usually reserved for adults hardened by politics, war, and betrayal. Yet in one of the most astonishing chapters of Roman history, a boy of just 13 was crowned emperor. At an age when most children were learning their lessons and playing in the gardens of wealthy families, this young boy suddenly wore the purple robes of power and sat upon the throne of Caesar. He held authority over an empire stretching from the scorching deserts of Africa to the foggy forests of Germania. The entire Roman world, from senators to common citizens, now looked to him for leadership. To the people, the boy was a symbol of continuity, a living reminder that the empire endured despite political turmoil. But for those who understood the deadly politics of Rome, his ascent was shocking, even terrifying. A child ruler meant fragility. It meant vulnerability. Could someone so young really command legions, make critical decisions, and navigate the treacherous waters of imperial politics? The palace was a place of shadows, filled with advisors, generals, and relatives who had their own ambitions. Every smile could hide a plot. Every handshake could mask betrayal. The boy quickly realized that wearing the crown meant living in a constant storm of intrigue, where loyalty was rare and danger was always near. Yet, despite his youth, the emperor began to show remarkable intelligence. He observed the actions of those around him, learned from experienced generals, and listened carefully to his advisors. Even at 13, he understood the importance of appearances, timing, and strategy. Every decision mattered, not only for his survival, but for the stability of the empire. The Roman legions, fierce and battle-hardened, now followed the orders of a boy. Some soldiers doubted his ability to lead, but others were inspired by his courage and determination. The emperor's youth was both a weakness and a strength. While he lacked experience, he also carried an unpredictable spark that made him difficult to control or manipulate completely. The story of this young emperor is a powerful reminder of the delicate balance between power and vulnerability. At 13, he had stepped into a world far larger and more dangerous than most adults could survive. And yet, in that moment, a child held the fate of one of the greatest empires in history in his hands. Being emperor in Rome was never easy, but for a child, it was a nightmare disguised as a crown. The imperial palace, with its grand halls and golden columns, was a place of beauty and danger. Behind every ornate door and beneath every lavish banquet lay whispers of betrayal, plotting, and deadly ambition. The young emperor quickly realized that the people around him were not always what they seemed. Advisors who bowed and smiled could secretly crave the throne for themselves. Senators who praised his decisions might later conspire to remove him. Even members of his own family could harbor jealousy, resentment, or outright hatred. At just 13, he had to navigate a web of deceit that would have confounded even the most experienced ruler. Every day was a test of survival. Meetings with generals and senators required careful listening and sharp judgment. A single misstep, a misplaced word, a delayed command, or a misread gesture could cost him the loyalty of the army or the support of influential politicians. The boy quickly learned that in Rome, power was not given. It was taken, defended, and constantly earned. But the young emperor was not entirely helpless. He had advisors, yes, but he also had instinct, curiosity, and an intelligence that set him apart. He watched the interactions between adults closely, learned to spot false flattery, and began to understand the subtle rules of influence and persuasion. Slowly, he discovered that being underestimated could be an advantage. Many around him assumed that a child could never grasp the dangerous intricacies of power, and that mistake often worked in his favor. Even so, the weight of responsibility was enormous. The boy was expected to maintain the empire's stability, enforce laws, and prevent rebellions, all while being watched by those who might see his youth as an opportunity. Nights were sleepless, filled with reports of plots and the constant need to make decisions that could mean life or death. Through all this, the young emperor learned one crucial lesson. Survival in Rome depended not just on power, but on wisdom, courage, and cunning. In a palace filled with shadows, he had to shine brightly enough to command respect, yet carefully enough to avoid becoming a target. The Palace of Shadows was a world most adults could not endure, but this boy had no choice. Here in the heart of Rome, he began the slow, dangerous journey of becoming a ruler in a world that never forgave weakness. While the palace was a battlefield of shadows and whispers, the true test of power lay on the battlefield itself. Rome's legions were legendary, disciplined, battle-hardened, and loyal to the empire. But now, these seasoned warriors were expected to follow the orders of a boy of just 13. Imagine the challenge, commanding thousands of men who had faced brutal wars, conquered distant lands, and witnessed unimaginable horrors, all while barely understanding the world as a child does. Many soldiers doubted him. How can a boy lead men who have fought in Germania, Africa, and Gaul? They whispered. Yet despite their skepticism, the young emperor held the ultimate authority. He knew he could not rely on his age or charm alone. He studied military strategy, observed the generals, and listened carefully to their counsel. Over time, he learned to issue commands with clarity, balancing boldness with caution. His youth allowed him a fresh perspective, unburdened by the rigid thinking of veteran leaders. At times, his decisions surprised even the most experienced generals, and sometimes they worked brilliantly. But the pressures were immense. Every battle plan carried enormous risk. A miscalculation could lead to thousands of deaths or the loss of territory. Even a single failed campaign could embolden enemies at home and abroad, invite rebellion, or give his rivals in the palace the excuse they needed to strike. The boy emperor carried the weight of the empire on his young shoulders, knowing that every choice had consequences far beyond his years. Yet, there was another side to his youth. People underestimated him. Generals and politicians often assumed a child could not understand the nuances of war or leadership. That underestimation became his secret weapon. By observing carefully and acting decisively, he was able to outmaneuver those who sought to control or manipulate him. Commanding the legions was more than strategy. It was about earning respect. The young emperor needed to inspire soldiers who had seen countless leaders rise and fall. He had to prove that courage, intelligence, and vision were not measured by age. And slowly he began to earn that respect, not just as a figurehead, but as a true commander capable of guiding Rome's mightiest warriors. In the eyes of the world, he was still a boy. But on the battlefield, he was beginning to show that even a child could wield the power to shape the destiny of an empire. For a young emperor, surviving Rome's palace was only half the battle. Outside the walls of the imperial palace, threats lurked at every corner, and even inside, betrayal was constant. Ambition ran like a poison through the veins of senators, generals, and relatives alike. Every ally could become an enemy, every smile could hide a dagger. At 13, the boy emperor had to navigate a world where loyalty was rare and danger was everywhere. Advisors who seemed trustworthy might secretly plot to take his throne. Generals who promised support could turn against him when opportunity struck. Family members, often those closest to him, could harbor jealousy, resentment, or even violent ambitions. In Rome, blood was not always a guarantee of protection. Despite the constant danger, the young emperor began to develop a keen sense for reading people. He learned to detect false flattery, to notice hesitation in a soldier's eyes, or a subtle glance exchanged between conspirators. Each day he sharpened his instincts, realizing that in a palace full of shadows, perception could be as deadly as a sword. Yet betrayal was not only a threat, it was a lesson. By observing plots and conspiracies, the boy emperor learned patience, strategy, and timing. He began to understand that sometimes survival meant biding his time, pretending to be weaker or more naive than he was, and striking only when the moment was right. In a dangerous game of power, his youth became an unexpected advantage. Those who underestimated him often found themselves outmaneuvered. Even with cunning and intelligence, the pressure was immense. Every day could bring news of uprisings, secret plots, or assassination attempts. Nights were filled with anxiety, for sleep could mean missing a warning, a message, or a subtle betrayal that might save or cost his life. In Rome, mistakes were deadly, and even a single error could unravel everything he had achieved. And yet, through all the threats the boy emperor endured, he was learning what it truly meant to rule, not only to lead armies or pass laws, but to survive in a world that tested every ounce of courage, wisdom, and cunning. Each betrayal, each threat, strengthened him, shaping a ruler who, despite his age, could navigate one of the most dangerous courts in history. The young emperor's reign was far from safe, but he had discovered a vital truth. In Rome, power belonged to those who could outthink, outlast, and outmaneuver their enemies, no matter how young they were. By the time the young emperor reached his mid-teens, he had already faced challenges that would have crushed most adults. Wars, palace intrigues, betrayal, and constant threats had been his teachers, and yet he had survived. Though his reign was brief and fraught with danger, the mark he left on Rome was remarkable. Even as a child, he proved that leadership was not only about strength or experience, it was also about intelligence, courage, and adaptability. He had commanded armies, earned the respect of battle-hardened generals, and navigated the deadly politics of the palace with a careful mix of wit and instinct. In doing so, he demonstrated that age was not the sole measure of a ruler's capability. History often remembers emperors for their conquests, their cruelty, or their wisdom, but the boy emperor's story is unique. He was a living symbol of both the empire's strength and its fragility. His youth reminded Rome that even the greatest power could be fragile, and that survival often required more than armies and wealth. It demanded cunning, foresight, and resilience. Some viewed him as a figurehead, a puppet controlled by older, more experienced politicians. Yet those who watched closely saw glimpses of his independence, his decisions that surprised even the most seasoned generals, and his quiet determination to maintain control over an empire that many thought was too vast for a child to govern. His reign, however short, became a testament to the astonishing reality that leadership could emerge from the most unexpected places. The lessons of his life extend beyond Rome. They speak to the delicate balance between innocence and responsibility, vulnerability and power. They remind us that greatness can be found in the unlikeliest of people and at the unlikeliest of ages. Though history often celebrates adults for their accomplishments, the boy emperor remains a powerful reminder that even a child can shape the destiny of nations. In the vast annals of Roman history, his story stands out, not for the years he lived, but for the courage, intelligence, and resilience he displayed while holding the fate of one of the greatest empires in history in his hands. Rome's history is filled with rulers of all kinds, but few tales shock, inspire, and terrify like that of the boy who became emperor. His story lives on as a symbol of power, fragility, and the extraordinary potential that can reside in even the youngest among us.